The techniques work. You breathe, you journal, you catch the thought. And then, 3 days later, the spiral is back. That's not a willpower problem. Your mind isn't broken. It's hungry. It's searching for something permanent in a world where everything keeps moving. And until you feed it the right thing, the noise doesn't stop. In this video, I'll show you. Number one, why overthinking always comes back even after the techniques work, and what's actually driving it beneath the surface. Number two, what the Vedic concept of samskara reveals about why your mind runs the same loops for years and how modern neuroscience confirms it. Number three, the one shift that gives your mind a stable anchor so the noise quiets on its own, not through suppression, but through redirection. Let's get into it. A woman named Priya once told me something I haven't forgotten. She was 43, successful by every external measure, and she said, I'm tired of endless thoughts holding me back. It's a really important year for my future, but I can't focus. She had tried therapy. She had the breathing apps. She knew all the reframes. And still, at 2 a.m., the thoughts came back like water finding a crack. She wasn't undisciplined. She wasn't broken. She had just never been shown what the mind is actually looking for. Think about the last time you successfully stopped an overthinking spiral. Maybe you went for a walk. Maybe you called a friend. Maybe you did the breathing, and it worked. The thoughts slowed. You felt calmer. And then a week later, the same spiral came back, wearing a slightly different costume. This is the part nobody explains. And it's the question that fills the comment sections of every overthinking video on the internet. Why do the techniques work in the moment, but the overthinking always comes back? Is there something deeper driving it that nobody is fixing? The answer lives in a 2,500-year-old Sanskrit text called the Yoga Sutras. The very second line of that text defines the entire goal of the practice, Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Translated literally, it means the cessation of the fluctuations of the mind field. Chitta is the mind field. Vritti means fluctuations, whirlpools, disturbances. The ancient teachers weren't describing overthinking as a bad habit. They were describing it as the natural state of a mind that has not found its anchor. Modern neuroscience catches up to this precisely. Researchers call it the default mode network. It's the part of your brain that activates when you're not focused on a task. It's responsible for mind wandering, self-referential thought, rumination about the past, and anxiety about the future. When neuroscientists scan the brains of chronic overthinkers, the default mode network is overactive. It never really gets a day off. But the critical finding, the one that most YouTube videos skip past, is this. The default mode network quiets down, not through suppression, not through forcing yourself to stop thinking, but when the brain is given a meaningful, stable focal point, a worthy object of sustained attention. The breathing exercise gives it a focal point for 4 minutes. Then the exercise ends and the mind goes right back to searching. This is why the techniques work once and then stop. They are managing the symptom. They are not feeding the hunger. Bhakti philosophy, the devotional branch of Vedic wisdom, was very direct about this. The restless mind, it said, seeks fulfillment in sense objects, in outcomes, in validation, in certainty about the future. But because all of those things are temporary, the mind never finds lasting satisfaction. It gets a hit of relief, and then it goes looking again. The mind becomes peaceful only when directed toward a higher, unchanging object of focus. You don't have to be religious to use this insight. The secular translation is simple. Your mind needs a focal point that doesn't move, not a goal that you'll either achieve or fail at, not a relationship that can end, a value, a commitment, something that remains true about who you are regardless of what happens around you. That's the gap the techniques leave open. They quiet the noise for a moment, but they don't give the mind somewhere to live. There's a word in Sanskrit that I want you to sit with for a moment, samskara. It translates roughly as impression or groove. The ancient teachers used it to describe the mental grooves carved by repeated thought patterns. Every time you think a thought, you deepen a groove. And the deeper the groove, the more automatically water runs through it. If you have spent 5 years or 10 years or 40 years running the same anxious thought loops, you haven't developed a character flaw. You have carved a very deep groove. I think about a man who once wrote in a comment something that stopped me cold. He said, I'm 70 years old I live alone, and it's extremely hard not to reflect on all my mistakes in life. 70 years old, decades of the same groove, not because he was weak, because nobody ever showed him that the groove itself could be recarved. Modern neuroscience has a name for this too: neuroplasticity. The brain physically changes based on which thought patterns you repeat. The neural pathways you use most often become the highways. The ones you stop using get pruned. This is not a metaphor. This is structural brain change. So, when someone says, I've been an overthinker my whole life, that's just who I am. They are describing a groove so deep it feels like identity. But a groove is not identity. A groove is a habit of attention. The Vedic teachers understood something that took Western neuroscience until the 1990s to confirm. You cannot erase a samskara by fighting it. Suppression deepens the groove. Every time you white knuckle your way through an anxious thought, you're still running the groove. You're still practicing it. The only way to change a groove is to carve a new one, deliberately, repeatedly, with sustained attention directed somewhere else. This is why the ancient practice of Mahantru, of sacred sound, repeated with intention, was never about religion. It was groove technology. You're not chanting to a deity. You're physically rerouting your mind's default pathway through repetition. The secular version of this is what modern therapists call values based living. When you stop asking, how do I stop thinking about this? And start asking, what do I want to keep returning my attention to? You shift from fighting the old groove to building a new one. And here is the practical point: you cannot build a new groove with willpower alone. You need a practice, something you return to daily, not because you feel like it, because repetition is how grooves get carved in either direction. The overthinker who says, it's slowly killing me from inside and I can't even tell anyone, is not describing a character defect. They are describing a groove that has been running unopposed for a long time. The path out is not discipline, it's redirection, practiced until the new path becomes the easier one. So we've established what's happening. The mind is hungry for something permanent. It has carved a groove through years of anxious repetition. Now, the question that actually matters: what does the anchor look like? And how do you find yours? I want to be specific here because this is where most advice gets vague and useless. A stable anchor is not a goal. Goals are future dependent. The mind will overthink every variable between here and the goal. A stable anchor is not a person. People change, relationships shift, and a mind anchored to another person is one conversation away from free fall. A stable anchor is a commitment to a way of being that doesn't require external conditions to be true. The Bhakti tradition called this bhava, a quality of heart you orient toward regardless of circumstance. A therapist working in acceptance and commitment therapy would call it a core value. The language differs, the mechanics are identical. Here is how you find yours: not through journaling prompts, through a specific question. When the overthinking is loudest, what is it protecting? Most chronic overthinking is not random. It orbits around something the mind has decided is fragile and important. Financial security, someone's opinion of you, a decision you're afraid to get wrong. The overthinking is the mind trying to control an outcome it cannot guarantee. The anchor doesn't give you control over the outcome. It gives you something more useful, a place to return to when the outcome is uncertain, which is always. For one person, that anchor might be the commitment to honesty in everything they do. The mind can spiral about whether the business will succeed, but it can return to, I will be honest in how I pursue it. That's a stable point. The outcome is uncertain, the commitment is not. For another person, the anchor is a daily practice: 15 minutes of Mahantru or meditation, or reading something that reconnects them to what they believe about the world. Not because 15 minutes fixes everything, because 15 minutes daily recarves the groove. It trains the mind to know where home is. The Yoga Sutras describe this process as abhyasa, sustained practice combined with vairagya, non attachment to the results of that practice, practice without grasping at the outcome. That combination is the exact opposite of how the overthinking mind operates. The overthinking mind practices anxiety and grasps desperately at certainty. Flip both. Practice returning to your anchor and release the demand that the outcome be guaranteed. This is how to stop overthinking at the root, not by silencing the mind through force, but by giving it somewhere worth going. The noise doesn't disappear immediately, but it loses urgency. The mind starts to trust that there is a home to return to, and the frantic searching begins to quiet. One practical starting point: identify the single value or commitment that feels most true to you right now. Write one sentence that captures it, not a goal, a way of being. Then, every time the spiral starts, return to that sentence, not to analyze it, just to read it and breathe. You're not stopping the thought, you're rerouting the groove. Do that for 30 days, and the neuroscience is unambiguous about what happens next. The new pathway deepens, and the old one starts to fade. That 30-day practice sounds simple, and it is. But if you've been running the same groove for years, finding the right anchor, the one that's actually yours and not borrowed from someone else's framework, that's where most people get stuck. If you have tried the techniques, you've read the books, you've done the journaling, and the overthinking keeps coming back, the fastest way through that is a real conversation, not a course, not another video, a conversation. I do free 15 to 30-minute calls. No pitch, no agenda beyond this. We look at where you actually are, what's driving the loop in your specific situation, and you walk away with a clear next step. Even if we never work together again, you leave that call knowing exactly what to do and why. The link to book is in the description at dailymindreset.com/consultation. It takes about 2 minutes to schedule. If the spiral is costing you sleep, focus, or years of your life, 2 minutes is worth it. Subscribe if you want more of this kind of thinking. One video a week, no filler. What's the one thing your mind keeps circling back to, no matter how many times you try to move past it?